Interesting. And do you kind of think that when people try to present a sort of logical, coherent um, description of pantheism, they kind of tend to reach out for more sort of abstract, non-naturalistic interpretation? That there seems to be very few academic, descriptive presentations of pantheism. I don't know. You're obviously far more familiar with the literature than I am. Like, would that sort of view be correct? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a tendency. So this is where now I think we could start getting to what I think we need to have for pantheism to be pantheism and not something
Yeah.
else. Um, I think like so a good example of this is like John Burroughs. So Burroughs comes to mind because I'm in the Hudson Valley. Burroughs was a naturalist in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Really an amazing fellow, but he described himself as a pantheist. But then when you read his writings, it's just that he thinks nature has a kind of really loose kind of unity, and it's an object of devotion for him. Okay, all right. So, he calls that pantheism, but it just looks like it's just revering nature, and that's it, right? And so, and this is where this comes then to the point that you asked earlier about what sometimes people might be identifying as pantheism, and I think a lot of times it's kind of more like a pan-ultimism is what I've called it in the little book that I wrote, which is right. People sort of see things as being connected and having this sort of I mean, think about things like deep ecology and things like this, right? Just how right you know we live in these right ecosystems, and there's this deep dependence between all these constitutive elements, right, that make up an ecosystem. And you recognize that, and you see right the beauty in that, and it induces a sense of awe, let's say, right, and then you experience reverence for that. I think that's great, cool, but I don't know if that's really pantheism, right? So I'm disinclined. I mean, people can use terms however they want, but when you start thinking about at least philosophical work on pantheism, and you look at people like the Stoics, or assuming Spinoza could be interpreted as being a pantheist, which is a standard interpretation, but that's controversial these days. Or if you look at, again, later pantheists, particularly in the idealist tradition, they're saying something much more, they want something more robust, if you will. It's not just that there are these connections between things in nature, but in particular that the kind of connectedness that the universe would exhibit and that they think it exhibits is the kind of unity that's characteristic of things that we call minds, right? And so that's where I that's again sort of another sort of line in the sand that I've sort of drawn in my work, which is I think that we have to be careful. Again, people can use terms however they want, but a lot of times what people are describing as being pantheism looks again more like just a kind of deep reverence for nature, or a kind of pan-ultimism where right the totality of existence, right, that are constitutive of the universe, that totality exhibits is united in some sort of way, and oftentimes it's very mystical, right, the way this is articulated, and right, that's something that I revere, and that I want to resist calling that pantheism, in part just because, right, the idea with pantheism as I see it is it's supposed to be right God, right, everything, right, the totality of existence, and again, right, by which I mean the things that are constituents of the physical universe, though that altogether is God, right, if pantheism is true. And so now then you need to say something about what something would have to be like to be God. And as I see it, one of the things would be that it would have to be a mind in some sense, right? It would have to kind of, the relevant sort of unity that the universe would have to exhibit is the kind of unity that is characteristic of a cognitive system. So that's what I want to then, right, again, sort of and that's been sort of a point that I've tried to that I've raised a lot actually in my work on this topic, which is right, the relevant kind of unity that the universe would be exhibiting is a really, if pantheism is true, would be of a fairly robust type, right? Otherwise, again, you could kind of call it whatever you want again, but it just starts looking like I love nature, and nature has a cool kind of unity to it. But if it's not this more robust variety of unification, again, that we see in discrete cognitive systems, but now it would be on a universal scale, it's hard for me to see that as being something that's worth being called pantheism, right? Again, because it's not. You got to get the God part, if you will, right? You could get the all part, that's fine. The all part you can get for free if you want, right? It's the God part that is, again, where I think that it needs to be in mind. And now it becomes an interesting hypothesis to me, right? Now it's something that is not just this sort of, I fancy nature. I love it. I'm experiencing awe. Okay, I'm revering it. And then I'm thinking there's some mystical connection between everything. No, on this kind of view, I think, again, a version of pantheism that's worth endorsing that would be genuinely naturalistic, right? At the end of the day, what you have here is an hypothesis about the universe that is, at least in principle, confirmable, right? Or just confirmable, right? So now what you have to be looking for is, right, whether or not the universe actually has the kind of features that would make it such that it can be, right, the kind of system that processes information in the way that is characteristic of minds. And here I'm assuming some version of computationalism, right, where now what you're talking about is a system that exhibits a kind of, right, tight functional integration, right, that, right, involves, right, the processing of information for particular goals and ends and so on, right? So, so now it looks like religious faith in this context is more like an hypothesis, right, for the pantheist, right? It is something that may turn out to be false, right? And it's right, if the universe doesn't exhibit that kind of unity, well, all right, it's done. Which is, you can't do that, again, with traditional theism, right? Similarly, you're not going to be able to do that with a kind of mystical, pan-ultimate nature worship kind of thing, right? Well, okay, man, there's a mystical connection between things, and I became aware of it when I was on shrooms. Cool. That's not what we're talking about, I guess, in this context. So, again, people, I think, should feel free to use the term pantheism however they want. But at the end of the day, I think if it's going to be an interesting view, it's going to be, A, naturalistic, so it's different from panentheism, and B, it's going to be making claims about the universe, right, exhibiting the kind of structure that is characteristic of a mind. And so,
if you enjoyed this clip, head on over to Locals to watch the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can freely listen to the audio-only version of the conversation. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, please like, subscribe, and then hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a new episode. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.